Aaron, thank you so much for that welcome. I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, my name is Eric. And yeah, this is one of my most favorite topics to discuss. So I'm looking forward to sharing this with you. Uh, I have been teaching guitar and music forever. My grandfather was a band director at our local high school for 45 years and a big band musician. So this is something that's really close to me and something I followed really closely while building the Fonz platform, where we've gotten to talk to hundreds and now thousands of private teachers from all over the world, which is the thing you hear most of them is often like, why didn't I learn about business when I was in music school? So today we're going to just kind of dive right into that topic about this idea of, yes, we are entrepreneurial by nature. There's so many things that we can pick up, and there's so worthwhile for us to be curious about these ideas of intertwining business and our art and our teaching and connecting that. And I love starting out by tying this all together with this idea of intentionality. The fact that as artists and as musicians, we can choose how we want to impact our communities and at what scope and at what scale. And of course, we can also choose how we want to foundationally support ourselves, both financially and spiritually, and all those things. We have a lot of freedom. Unfortunately, a lot of us, and maybe if you went to music school, a lot of you didn't get that education in how to go out in the world and make things happen. So, although this talk is really aimed at private music teachers and studios and schools, I really hope that anyone here that works in music and is creative can take something away from it today. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of move around into a journey, and we're going to work really quickly. And hopefully you're going to leave here with something or a few tidbits that really add a lot of value to your experience. So we're going to kind of go between this idea of big picture thinking, our entrepreneurial mindset, how we embrace that, what it means to be an entrepreneur. And then we're going to do a little bit of business 101, right? What you learn in business school about how a business works. And we're just going to start scratching the surface of that and say, hey, that's interesting. That's not scary, but this could actually really help me in being better at my craft and delivering to my community. And then we'll kind of come back a little bit into a heart-centered mission and value statement to say, yeah, how can we wrap that in? And then we'll look at the hats you wear as a studio owner and as a musician in your everyday life that you may not even know you're doing. And we'll apply those ideas we talked about into a couple everyday things that are business related for our work. This photo right here is a picture of my annual guitar barbecue that I host. And it was a great part of my journey where when I first had my first recital, when I first moved to Seattle and I'd gotten out of music school and I was teaching in a music school, my first year, two students showed up for my first recital, and they were both awesome. One's now a principal bassist for the Seattle Symphony. It was great, but it was very disheartening how many of my students actually came. And the next year, I hosted this guitar barbecue, and 150 people showed up, where I cooked for a couple days, and everyone bought some food, and everyone brought their friends. And it became this annual event where instead of just a traditional recital, we'd have about 200 people show up. The kids would play, and it's kind of been just a real foundational part of my journey as a guitar teacher, and something I'm really excited about. So today we're going to start with this idea of embracing the fact that we are all entrepreneurs, music teachers, musicians. We are entrepreneurial. And I love, if you look up the definition of what an entrepreneur is, a person who organizes and operates a business, yes, taking on greater than normal financial risks in order to do so. I can't think of anything more entrepreneurial than being a musician, because as we know, there's obviously a financial risk in just choosing to become an artist and to work in the arts. But the fabulous thing about this is that I truly believe that right now is the greatest time to be a music teacher, a mentor, a guide ever that we've ever seen, definitely in my lifetime. And as the world's become more digitally connected and more personally disconnected, people are really striving and wanting to improve at things, to work at things, and to be connected with other people in real life, to express themselves authentically. So just the overview of the market is fabulous, and that what we do right now, there's never been more demand for it, right? And so you're sitting there, you're saying, yes, I am entrepreneurial. I do own my business. I've taken this risk. And yes, my well-being and my success I'm responsible for them, right? I'm working for myself. And this is a fundamental shift in our thinking, and that the core of this talk is that, yeah, I can really be intentional. I can do what I want to do. I can make a tremendous amount of money if that's important to me by teaching music lessons or having a school or performing. But I can also really impact my community in a beautiful, meaningful way and live a really happy life. The other important thing that I think is a really great mindset shift as we talk about being entrepreneurial is, not only is that right now is like the best time ever to be doing what we're doing, uh, to be impacting our communities the way we do, is that the reality that our clients, they want us to thrive. The people that we serve, the people whose lives we change, they want us to be healthy. They want us to be successful. And there's no need to feel weird about it, right? Right now, in this time, our work is so important. Our communities want us to feel valued. They want us to feel successful. So it's a great time to be in this business. And for many of us and many music teachers I talk to, I feel like at the beginning of their journey, there's a very different experience where they can feel like maybe society doesn't want them to do well, or traditionally they haven't. Maybe your music teacher did or didn't. Uh, but that's not really the case. We are in a beautiful time to be doing this. Being entrepreneurial is nothing like being Logan Roy. Hopefully, some of you all have seen Succession. We can run beautiful, heart-centered, awesome businesses and embrace it. We don't need to be afraid of it. And I think that is the shift in step one of starting this day, is we're looking at it and saying, yeah, I can do this. I'm embracing this, and I'm going to be successful at it. I do love Succession, by the way, and they're all such unredeemable human beings. Okay. So now a little bit of business 101, just kind of finding our way around. If you were to go and study business, one of the things that you would first learn is that there's something called functional areas of business. And I like this because it breaks apart like what makes a business tick. And there's, different ways of looking at it, but generally there's 5 or 6 main areas. Obviously, your strategy of what you're doing, your operations is what does your day to day, marketing, whatever you do, obviously, your equipment that you need and your space that you need to work in, the finance side of it, money and human resources, right? These are, any business is going to have these. And that's an area you'd study right away when you went to business school. But what I did is I broke this apart as a way to encourage you, especially if you're a private music teacher, into these functional areas of what a music studio actually does, right? And I think this is really appropriate and really important to think about, is that if you're an independent music teacher, first of all, leadership is incredibly important. You are directly impacting a community, whether it's your band room or your orchestra or it's your private studio. You are making a massive difference in many people's lives in the community, and you need to own that, and you need to try to optimize it to make sure you're as effective as possible at it. This is absolutely critical. This is the top of your business. Now, the operations part of it, that's physically teaching, scheduling your students, having them pay you, texting them to remind you that it's time for lessons, setting up your policies. This is day-to-day operations. Also very important, and an area that you can really improve the quality of your life a lot by focusing on. Marketing, many really successful music teachers are just, all my students come word of mouth. And for any of us that have been doing it for a very long time, we know that our students are our best marketing channels. But yeah, there's all different kinds of ways we can market our studio, especially if we're in a new town. And then there's finances, right? The money coming in, the debt that you have maintained and you carry to keep your studio running, or to buy instruments, or to pay for your education, your taxes. And of course, you are also your own HR director, right? You're responsible for your wellness, your health insurance, your vacation, your retirement, all these things. Those are up to you because you're self-employed, right? You are an entrepreneur. You have to own these things. And I know a lot of, including myself, my wife is an actor. For an early part of our career, we tried to just avoid that, right? And we tried to avoid a lot of this stuff. But once you open your eyes to it, you can say, oh, these are areas that I need to be focused on. Some of them are more important, some of them are will, and you can pick. But this idea of functional areas of what you do leads us to this idea that you actually wear a ton of hats already. right? In any business, you have this idea of these functional areas of business. Each one of them has a top to it, someone who runs it. And when you work for yourself, you are in charge of all of those. So, for instance, that leadership role, that's your CEO. That's you. That's you every day. Your CFO, obviously, your chief financial officer, and so on, your marketing officer. It's great to think about, I really need to market my studio. I'm going to really put on my CMO hat and I'm going to get out there and I'm going to work on this. I'm going to focus on this area. Or I need to really focus on the money. Or I need to really focus on my vision and what I'm going to offer my community as a CEO. We're going to look at a couple of these today, and that's kind of the direction this conversation is going to take. I'm going to just talk about a few of these sections and what we can do to lean into them and to embrace them. And hopefully you'll have some takeaways that you'll learn from. And obviously we won't have to be able to do an entire like business 101 class today, but we can talk about some of these areas and hopefully they'll inspire you to kind of dig into others. So I love talking about leadership. I love talking about vision. I love talking about mission for music teachers. I think it's so important. But for any company, a CEO has only two jobs. And I ask people this all the time, and it's really something like, I don't really know what a CEO does. The CEO's job is to define and promote the mission and vision for your great work, right? And so whether you're a guitar teacher in Seattle or a band or whatever it is that you're doing, your CEO job is constantly being in touch with that, promoting that, putting the word out about it, and being authentic about it. Your second job is allocating the resources that you have to support that work. As a music teacher, your resources are your time. Of course, it's money, but this is your two top level jobs as a CEO. Now, perhaps you feel really dialed in. Maybe you feel really strong in your mission. Maybe you feel really like, I've got my vision really dialed in. In any case, it's always a great idea to check in with that, because without it, this is what puts music teachers working as baristas. Not that that's a bad thing. It's one of my favorite jobs ever. And I still hope to be a barista again someday because I love talking to people so much. But mission is the thing that will keep us in the game, right? When we're not getting, we're not getting our composition out there in the world, or people aren't listening to them, or the phone's not ringing, or we're not getting gigs. Remembering why you're doing this is so critical. And as a side note, we're going to talk about mission today and a little bit about this leadership role. I would highly encourage anyone here to check out the book by Simon Sinek, if you haven't read it, called The Infinite Game, who talks about something called the just cause statement, which is kind of taking your mission statement a step further, looking forward. I absolutely encourage it. I think it's so helpful for musicians. It's one of my favorite books I've read in the last couple of years, and it's really helpful. So our mission, your mission as an entrepreneur, is to make sure this is dialed in. Why you're doing what you're doing, knowing the impact that you want to have on your community. It's really great work. And so what I did here is a couple examples that I thought were really wonderful. The Suzuki Association of Americas is improving the quality of life in the Americas through Suzuki education. Really, that's the mission. Now, notice it's not teaching a whole lot of people how to play strings through Suzuki education, right? It's improving the quality of life. That is the mission, right? My personal mission, my just cause, is to elevate the profession of private music teaching in the minds of musicians in the communities they serve. I think that's really important work because musicians have historically been underpaid, right? And overutilized and loved. And I'm trying to bring those two worlds together because I know the communities want musicians to thrive. And I know that musicians can learn to thrive. TED has one of my favorite missions of all time. It's to spread ideas. That's so awesome. So hopefully this gives you an idea of something and a direction, if you haven't, that you can lean into to start just trying to describe what is my mission. And the reason I mention this is because if you apply mission to all the businessy type work we're about to do, what you might think of as business, like making money, getting lots of students, whatever that thing is. If you apply this to that, it's much easier, and it takes out of what traditionally you may have leaned away from about considering business, right? You're like, oh, I can't intertwine business and art. I couldn't possibly. But if you think of it this way, is that by taking responsibility for your financial health and your business and your wellness, how much more you're going to be able to deliver great music into people's lives in your community, then suddenly you're like, oh, this makes sense. Now I'm motivated to learn about how to run a better business. How can I constantly work to be releasing more music, to be creating more music in the community, to seeing my students grow up and thrive, working to understand this landscape around my great work. There are people who want me to do well in this. So that's why we started here. Now, I'm going to take just a second, and I have to share a story that's very close to me right now. In this example is that I started teaching this kid named Paul when he was like in 6th grade. And he was a fabulous athlete. By the time he was a freshman in high school, he had led Lakeside High School, which is where Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos went to high school. He led them to a state championship. And at that state championship, my son, who then was 3, held the trophy. He carried him out on the field, and my son Huck held the trophy on the field. He's still in the picture of the team winning that. Well, Paul went off. We continued playing guitar through high school. And then he went off to college. He went to Georgetown, won a national championship there. And he just recently moved back to Seattle. And he has just gotten signed to the Seattle Sounders. And I was able to be here. This photo is at his first Major League Soccer match. And leading up to that, when he moved to Seattle, he was training hard. He returned to guitar. And we've been playing together every week. And we've been playing music together every week. The day before his match, he's playing guitar. And this is so meaningful to me on so many levels, because this is my mission statement in my community, is that the fact that now Paul is showing my 17-year-old daughter how to play soccer, right? They're hanging out playing soccer on Thursdays. Creating this community through my music studio has not only created what I think is a great impact in my community, it has massively improved my life and broadened my life. And saying that, yeah, what I'm selling in my personal studio, when I teach, I'm not just saying, hey, you come to my place for guitar lessons, right? I'm putting together a community. I'm bringing people together for these, dinners and jam sessions and performances. When they're really nervous about maybe starting their first Major League Soccer game, they call me and we play guitar together, right? Resilience, discipline, all these things. Music relates to everything. And I think Brian was just saying that in his keynote, which I think was so great. All of this stuff is so tied together. And if you can think of it on this level, the business piece becomes so much easier. So what I do is and at the end of this is I sell transformation and I sell impact. So it's absolutely reasonable for me to be well paid and to make a great living doing it. And hopefully you're seeing this, you're maybe connecting and thinking, wow, I have stories like this too. I've been teaching for a long time. I've seen students do great things. And yeah, it is a transformational, not lame, awesome line of work. So back to business. Now we're going to leave the world of the CEO, of the mission, of our impact, and we're going to move next over a column, which is into operations. Now, operations has been my life for the last 7 years in building Fonz, and Fonz is it's a studio automation platform that does all the business side of running a studio. It's an app. But in doing that, I've been hyper-focused on the day-to-day business operations of studios and other types of appointment-based business while we're at it. This area is so interesting because of how it works together with the vision and the mission. And it's also something you can work on a little bit every day. You can make slight tweaks to your operations that has a huge impact on what you will do. So we're going to talk a little bit about it. We talked about the operational side of running a teaching studio. And you may want to apply this to something else you're doing, whether it's composing or running your classroom, whatever that is. Your operations of teaching is you're teaching. I have this many hours a day to teach, this many days a week I want to do it. I need to make sure my students are scheduled. I need to make sure they're paying me. I need to make sure I'm pricing appropriately. I need to make sure I'm communicating clearly to them. So all these things, I have to have recitals. I have to keep my studio clean. That's my least favorite part of studio management. I need a way to onboard my new clients so they make sure they understand my policies. These are our operations, right? So we've broken these down. You might want, if you want to screenshot, you can watch it later. These are the areas that you might say, I could improve this, right? And what we want to do is we want to say, pick one and say, okay, I want to build a system to automate a piece of this, right? Or I want to reduce friction for new clients to get started in their first lesson. And there's hundreds of things we could discuss today. I want to increase my impact in the community by making more time or changing from teaching privates to teaching group lessons so I can see more people and bring people together. I'm going to invest. I'm going to buy myself a new guitar, which is always top of mind. So these areas of operation, we can pick one. So I'm going to pick one. And hopefully we'll have time to do two. But if I just want to apply what we talked about today, this idea of heart-centered work, of mission-based work, of embracing the idea that, yeah, I'm going to run a business here and I'm going to do it really well, and it's going to be really successful. Setting your rates. This, I think, is the most critical thing and the most important thing that most private music teachers historically did not understand. I think in the last 7 years, there's been a lot of progress, a lot of improvement in this, but historically, we've been very underpaid. We recently did a survey that went back and tracked what people had charged for lessons all the way back to the 60s, right? And you're seeing right now in the last 5 or 7 years, a tremendous increase in what private teachers make because it's finally starting to balance out with the amount of education they have, the amount of impact they have, the amount of value they have or that they give to their communities. So it's a great time to be doing this work. So my story and my path to how I kind of figured out this idea of rate setting and what's appropriate happened in about 2005. I had a great studio downtown Seattle. It was a great commercial space with a loft connected to it. My wife and I were planning to have our first kid, and I had decided it was time for me to do the logical next step, which is to leave teaching music and to go to law school or get my MBA, which I'd always thought about doing, as it had kind of always been on my plan to shift at some point and to do that. And I had this student in this picture right here. His name was Bryce, and Bryce was my mentor. He started taking lessons with me 2 weeks before his 60th birthday. He hired me for his 60th birthday to go on a bicycle trip with him. And we ended up, it was not a bicycle trip. It was a biker rally that was at the home of an NFL football player and a ranch in Wyoming. And I was like, what am I doing here? And they'd hired, famous country singers to come in and perform at this thing. And of course, the headliner for the first night didn't show up. So the father of this NFL player walks up to me and says, hey, do you want to take the gig tonight? And I was like, absolutely. So we had this incredible relationship, and Bryce was someone who was not just a mentor, he became a really close friend. And when I told him that it was like, we're thinking about moving on, he's like, Brandon, this is a terrible idea. What I just double your rates, man. He knew everybody in Seattle. And this is before people were doing that. This is early in that scene. Bryce is like, look, double your rates. No one's going to care. Just do it. I was teaching 40, 50 students a week at that time. He's like, no one wants you to leave teaching. Everyone wants you to teach us. Just double your rates. And so I said, no. And then reluctantly, he's like, well, if you're going to leave, you might as well. Reluctantly, I did it. And I had a very, very interesting thing happen. Whereas overnight, I told everybody that, hey, I need to stay in this business. I'm having a family. My rates are changing to this. And what happened was no one cared. That was one. Two, half the people said, thank you so much. We're grateful that you're doing this and that you're taking care of yourself and you're staying. Three, the people that I knew couldn't afford it, they all said, sure, we'll try to make it work. And I was able at that point to offer them lessons for free because I'd taken care of myself. I was like, wow, I just fixed my equity issue in the same one big move. 80% of my students were great with it. We're fine. 10% needed some help. I could now really freely give that. Lastly, and the most important thing about offering and setting your rate at a real professional level is that my phone started ringing off the hook. And I kid you not, within the next 6-8 weeks, I had a tremendous waiting list that I carried for the next decade, right? And this is another key idea of today, which is the idea of perceived value. If we value ourselves and our great work that we do, the community will compare two people. And I mean, I'll be honest, the guitar teacher that I studied with before doing this is a famous guitar player who I actually stopped taking lessons with because he was so good, it brought my spirit down. Because I knew that I'd never be able to do what he could do. I mean, he's amazing, but I was getting way more phone calls, and I'd be sending him students, and I'd be like, "Why are you calling?" And I realized these people were looking at what I was charging, and they were saying, Eric must be better because they're not experts in guitar yet. So this concept of perceived value, this idea of charging a rate that is professional, like, yeah, maybe I should charge as much as a mechanic charges. I think that's pretty fair. I've gone to school for a long time. Or even more, why not charge what a lawyer might charge? I have just as much education. I think I'm providing more impact. What will happen and what we've seen happen, and this is where we have great data on this from doing FONS and seeing the teachers around the country and the world that have been embracing this. Some have been doing it for a long time, and they've been quietly very, very busy. Some are getting turned on to it and experimenting in it, being like, well, what would happen if I charged a real rate that gave me a great living? They write in a few months later saying, wow, my studio is packed. I'm able to teach the people that can't afford it now because I've taken care of myself. And we've never heard it doesn't work. That's the thing. It always works if you are great at what you do. If you are heart-centered, if you are mission-driven, this always works. So this is an operational area that I think applying to your studio is a great idea, especially with the fall coming, especially with, with everything coming up in the universe. Now's a great time to do it. And you might say to yourself, there's no way I'm going to raise my rates for my clients. That's too terrifying. Then we encourage you to just do it to new clients. Change your advertised rate, right? And then, I mean, there's a million, I know all these questions that will come up as then you'll say, well, then I'll be standing on the soccer sidelines. And one mom's going to come up and say to me, how come I'm paying twice as much as this one for that one? That doesn't happen, right? But if it does, you're free to say, I grandfather, you can always just go back to what matters and say, yeah, that was my rate then. And as a way to thank them, I left them at that rate. This is my rate now. And to be honest, I'm about to raise it again because I'm so busy, and you're going to be able to enjoy that rate that I had before too. This is just economics. This is how we have to do things. And once you get in that cycle, not feeling weird about it, not feeling uncomfortable about it, all of your interactions will be so much more comfortable for you. And once you're like, wow, I'm really taking care of myself, I can take a vacation. I'm feeling comfortable paying my mortgage, all of these things. Then you have a more grateful heart. Then you can do more impactful work in your community. This is the virtuous cycle. And I keep discussing it because I'm trying to really push in the idea that becoming and developing a business acumen is something that can actually make you a more impactful artist and member of your community. So let's try another exercise and just really quickly and talk historically because we have time, which another exercise, let's talk about you getting paid, right? So we talked about the operational exercise of setting your rates, which is that, yeah, the exercise is let's try to reset them to something that's, more professional, something that, and see where that glass ceiling is, see what will happen if I do raise them. This one is more day-to-day operations, which is, how do I get paid? Now, I interviewed about 500 teachers while building FONS. I talked to some very famous concert classical pianists that also taught, had very thriving studios. And most of the answers that I got were things like, well, I have a hearth, and I hope that they put a check on the hearth because I don't like to ask for money. And my husband takes me to the bank. Like that was where we were kind of starting. Now, traditionally, and what I wanted to do when we started FONS is I wanted an automated invoicing system. I wanted a system that would like what my teacher did, which is count the number of lessons we took each month. And then that would send you an invoice. And then you'd open the invoice as a student. And then you'd read the invoice, you'd forget to pay it. I'd then remind you at the next lesson, ask the student, where's that check? The next week, the student might show up and the check's been like, pulls it out of their pocket and it's all wrinkly. And it's like, oh, well, it's been in my pocket for like the last 2 weeks. Maybe it went through the clothes washer. Like if you've been teaching lessons for a very long time, you know this style. So invoicing, automating the invoicing was my first dream for Fonz 7 years ago, until I sat down in a room full of engineers and really great statisticians and design people. And they're like, what are you talking about? This is so inefficient, right? You're like, of course, you're going to have a lot of people that end up actually not paying you. You're also going to have that whole thing where you send an invoice out and then people send in a check that's the wrong amount because they said, oh, I thought I told you I was going to be on vacation, so I changed the amount. They're like, this has to go. So the next one that's very common, especially with session players, people that travel a lot, paying for cash at lesson. And this is cool because it kind of makes you feel under the table. It's a little bit renegade. We all are going to have like a cash, pay at the time of the lesson type person. That's awesome. But it doesn't really get a great cash flow going, a great structure. What's really become huge in the last 7 years is P2P. P2P means peer-to-peer. And an example of that is Venmo or PayPal. Both of these solutions can be pretty cool because they're digital, but at the same time, solutions like this are very explicitly not for business. They try to make it not for business. Now, each of these has a platform that is for business. They have a solution that's business oriented, but most music teachers, they don't use it. So 9 out of 10 music teachers that do use Venmo or Ask PayPal, they're trying to say, hey, do me like a buddy, right? So pay for your lessons, Venmo me the money. And sure, you get to save a little bit of the credit card fee, but what you will learn is that by automating this thing and doing your business professionally, the 2.9% that all credit cards charge to be able to automate your payments is beyond measure the greatest investment you will ever make in your business, right? It is a tax write-off. It is a cost of operational business. It eliminates 95% of the need for administrative tasks and the stressful things. Why didn't you pay me? I hate talking about money in a guitar lesson. I do not like talking to a parent about a check while a child is sitting there warming up and tuning. To me, it really dumbs down the experience. And to be able to automate our payments in a beautiful way is something that if you're not doing it, I highly recommend. And obviously, I would highly recommend checking out Fonz, but there's many ways that it can be done. And what I want to talk about is the different ways it can be done, the different ideas for billing that are different than these traditional models. Automating your billing models, and it doesn't matter which one you pick, right? There are 3 ways that we've discovered in our work with Fonz that we have found to be very effective, that eliminate all the confusion, that allows you not to have to play bad cop. You can automate your cancellation policy. You're always paid on time. You're never chasing payments. And I want to talk about all 3 of them really quickly. And then hopefully, one or a combination would really jump out at you. Now, the first thing that we built at Fonz was this idea of a per appointment billing, which is that your client would sign up, you'd set them up and you say, hey, after your lesson every week, you're going to be billed X amount of dollars, just like an Uber for a piano teacher, right? And this is awesome because this is ultimately fair. I set my cancellation policy to 36 hours. My app will send the student a notification 48 hours outside of my cancellation window. So it's fair. They feel good about it. I'm not trying to cajole them into showing up. And they're like, oh my gosh, that's right. We're in Florida and I forgot to tell Eric we were on vacation. They'll cancel that lesson. They don't get charged. It's fair. It costs good business. After the appointment, your card gets charged. I love this, and this is great for performing artists. I end up in my studio now because of the work that I do. I'll end up having to cancel a lot of lessons. So for me, this is the greatest billing model, and it's been great for me, and it's great for a lot of people that do that type of work, that want to keep things very simple. The second one has taken huge, it's blown up in the last 8 years. And it was really first championed. I heard about it at MTNA at a keynote given by David Cutler, who's become a really good friend. He wrote a book called The Savvy Music Teacher, which I think is an awesome, it's an awesome tome to this idea of community-based music teaching. And his whole concept was, you're not charging a per lesson. You're charging to be a part of my community, right? So I'm going to charge X amount of dollars each month, and maybe you get 3 lessons in that month, and then the fourth week we have a masterclass. Or you could just say, I'm charging this much a month all year. You can count on averagely getting this many lessons. You'll get 38 to 42 lessons, but you'll also be able to do all the other things that I offer, right? My YouTube videos, or my additional compositions that come out, my recitals. It's all covered in this. And as a parent, which I'm now a parent of 2 kids, who are both in a lot of activities, we love this. Your customers love this because they're thinking to themselves, oh, wow, it's this, we can budget it. And yeah, if we go on vacation, it's already been applied. As a parent, you never think, I'm going to Maui for a week, so I wish I need to only pay 3/4 of how much I should pay this month. That's not how we think. The flat rate billing model, or the membership billing model, or a subscription billing model is beautiful if you're trying to make a living teaching, because it allows you to say, oh, I teach 30 students and I need each one to pay me $300 a month, whatever that number is that you need to do. And that way you've got a very easy model to build. You've got an easy business to build. So I absolutely love this one. You see it in pretty much every other discipline, right? And it's really taking root a lot in the teaching music realm right now. And I think a lot of it's because it's pretty easy to set up. But the last one is another very interesting one that we actually learned about first, because when Fonz was first built, we noticed a lot of personal trainers started using it. But the idea of these prepaid packages, this has been used in training, it's been used in tutoring, it's used in gyms a lot. And it's really started to take off with music teachers as well, which is saying, I don't invoice you anymore for the lessons, we're going to take this month. You buy the lessons up front. And the great thing about what we do at Fonz is you can say, okay, what we're going to do is you pay for 4 lessons up front when we first start. And then every time those 4 lessons run out, the card will automatically be charged and you'll buy 4 more. You can do this with packages of 4, 8, 12, whatever you want to do. But this is awesome because it allows your lessons to still they have to apply to the cancellation policy. They're enforced by your rules, but you never have to send an invoice. You set them up once and then you just teach. Now, we have a lot of data on this too. The average person that switches from a traditional invoicing system, right, to moving to any one of these or any combination of these, they're going to save between 5 and 20 hours a month, depending on how big their studio is, right? A large school will save over 20 hours a month. If you've been teaching for a long time, you know that this back and forth of scheduling and payments and all that stuff can be really daunting. So any one of these can be moved into your studio. Anyone can be played with. You can mix and match them. But this is a great exercise for you to do. So on that note, the last kind of idea I just want to circle back to today before we just do a quick review is this idea that you really should earn a wonderful living if you are a motivated, passionate music teacher. There are many people that are doing it. I have a close friend who is a private music teacher and his wife is a doctor. And as a family fun, competitive thing, his mission each year is to make more than she does. And he's done it for the last 3 years. And, he has a great impact on his community. He is very helpful and equitable in how he can reach other people. He makes sure to have those avenues open. It can be done. This is the important message from today is that, yes, if you're seeing this and you're a private music teacher and you are feeling like you're struggling, you shouldn't be. And there's a real direct path that you can start working a little bit each day to move toward it. So I wanted to thank everybody here for coming. And hopefully this brought a little bit of curiosity and maybe wanted you to dig a little bit deeper. I'm Eric at fonz.com. If you have any questions, if you're interested in learning more about a community of people that just talk about this type of work, I moderate a Facebook group called Fonz Family. And it's not dependent on using Fonz, but it is a fabulously motivated, kind, encouraging group of incredible teachers from all over the world who just share advice and encouragement. So you are absolutely welcome to join that. We'd love to see you there. And I'd welcome anybody if they had any questions or if there's anything that they'd like to talk about, please feel free to contact me. So thank you so much for having me today. It's been a real pleasure.